Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order our regular meeting of council for Monday, June the 26th, 7 p.m. There are a couple of changes to our agenda. Two items to remove council, bylaw number 1665 and 1666, which are items 8.4 and 8.5 on our agenda. The information that was required in order for these to proceed has not been registered with the development agreement, and so staff was hopeful that we'd have it in readiness for this evening, but it's not, so we'll pull those for a future council meeting. The second one was, and it's on our desks, was an arrival of a letter from BC Transit in regards to a participation in an Island Highway Transit Priority and Park and Ride study. And the correspondence is here, but I do need a vote to add that to our agenda. So motion and seconder and a vote, please.
I'll move it, Your Worship, as amended. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. So we will add that in our new business, and I gave it a 6.3 numbering. With the change in our agenda, looking for approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Public participation. This is the time for members of the audience to step forward and make a comment. If you have anything to say, we'd be happy to hear from you. We ask for name, address. If you're reluctant to give the address out loud because we are webcast, that needs to be provided to the recorder.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Hamilton and fellow council.
Can I get you to the microphone?
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Better?
Yes.
My name is Cynthia Elbers, and I reside at 276 Milburn Drive. Susan McDonald and Rob Kennedy, who could not be here this evening, requested that I read aloud a letter sent to Colwood Council June 20th concerning speeding on Milburn, Lagoon, and Ocean Boulevard. I will forego the reading of the letter in light of time restraints, but I will point out some joint concerns. Susan writes, "We understand the desire of council to consider the entire community and to get it right the first time. However, we do not understand why after many, many years of complaints from residents, this has not been dealt with. We cannot stress enough the degree of speeding on Hatley, Milburn, and Ocean Boulevard, as well as Lagoon. Obviously, options are limited. We cannot be both a rural beach area and a city thoroughfare. Either one street must be designated as a major artery with appropriate speed control, sidewalks, and crosswalks on the entire area, or the entire area must be calmed. Speed cushions allow for passage of emergency vehicles and provide permanent barriers to speeding vehicles. They could be installed in both Milburn and Lagoon and also on Ocean Boulevard. Painted crosswalks or even written messages slow down on roads might help. We are in agreement that police resources are stretched, RCMP cannot be everywhere, and I believe the RCMP are a short-term fix for a long-term problem. Words to describe the volume and speed of traffic along Milburn and surrounding areas: aggressive, habitual, chronic, liability issue. Since the 30K dawn to dusk speed zone along Metchosin Road, now traffic is exiting Metchosin and onto Hatley onto Milburn, and now find themselves being used as shortcuts to get to Ocean Boulevard. We've witnessed vehicles cut down onto Hawkering, Aloha, Anchorage, and onto Lagoon as a means to beat the traffic at the bottom of Milburn. We ask council for their consideration in dealing with this issue as it's getting increasingly more serious. It's incredibly frustrating. It's very discouraging. And we just hope that somebody can liaison with us to get this resolved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other members?
Tim Day, 3546 Charnley Place. I'm here to talk about the trees that were killed at our place by the city and I promised my first speech that I would provide some pictures, and so I provided 25 pictures to council, and I think that these pictures show that my trees, and specifically the sequoia, were not under consideration for killing, as shown by the City of Colwood pictures, and they didn't bother to take a picture of any of the trees that they meant to kill, only pictures of the hedge after it failed after a snowstorm. They used the pictures of the hedge that failed after the snowstorm as justification for killing the entire hedge. The trees that fell down were not a safety concern. They were on the ground. One did touch the gutter, minor cosmetic damage. Annihilating all those trees on a hill that's just a small slope under justification of they were all killed for slope stability as they may fail at any time. Well, they showed that they wouldn't fail at any time. It took a lot to make those 3 trees fall down. There was a lot of abuse by the neighbor and neglect that caused the 3 trees to fall down. They were never maintained. They were very heavy on the house side, and that's why they fell over. It's clear in the pictures. It's also clear in the pictures that he dug out the high side of the trees so the roots would no longer have any ground to hold on to, and the pictures showed that the roots that have come up out of the ground are just little wisps. So the root system was damaged on the high side, and he was also undermining the base of the sequoia tree, but I don't think that would have caused it any problems. As I've said, the city showed up at 8 o'clock in the morning with a lot of people, a lot of equipment, and started killing everything. They never notified us, and I had a highway use permit for the work that I had done on the boulevard, planting the sequoia and the 4 golden Yolanda, which shouldn't have been part of the hedge killing. And the hedge killing should have not even been part of any of the work, as the branches and the fallen trees were cleared up in February after they fell. The return visit on March 24th is in no way justified. No arborist report, and I can't get copies of invoices for the cleaning up of the trees next door or the invoice of killing the hedge and our trees. I don't know why I can't, but the city will not provide it. So I'd like to talk about the process of having a highway use permit and what protection or lack of protection was shown to us. We were never notified or consulted on the city's plan to kill all 5 trees. Planted in 1995 and approved by highway use permit in 2003. The giant sequoia was a significant tree, and that's easy to tell in the pictures of it. I just took the Google road map thing, and you can see that it's a very nice tree, and it was in no danger, and no one's ever said that it was a danger. They've only implied that it may be a danger in the future because it wasn't tall enough and wouldn't be in my lifetime tall enough to reach the house. Those trees were stabilizing my work that I did on the boulevard to improve the safety of the boulevard and provide a green space, a habitat, and protection for the other large trees. As you can see from the pictures, the sequoia is not a large tree. The ones beside it are large trees, and if it had been allowed to grow, it would have grown to help protect those, provide habitat, and reduce carbon and everything else. In Seattle, this tree would have been considered for exceptional status, having a diameter greater than 2 feet 6 inches. In Surrey, the sequoia would have been a protected tree as it was greater than 3 meters tall. The city will not even acknowledge the killing of the 4 golden leilani. They served no purpose whatsoever than to provide a green space and privacy for our yard. They were stabilizing the slope. They were maintained. You can see from the pictures, they were not very tall. Transparency, or lack thereof. No records, no reports, no invoices. There is only thing generated was after the fact and generated by other people, not the main players. So these people, whatever they do, obviously are not supervised. Accountability. The main players in killing our trees, Rob Boyle and Gord Bouvier, have not made a written report of their actions leading up to the killing of our trees. Rob Boyle and Gord Bouvier.
Your Worship, I'm sorry, but it's inappropriate to start naming staff in this. It's an open meeting.
No names, Mr. Day.
Okay. Well, there's no written report of the 2 staff that showed up on site, the 2 staff behind the killing of our trees. On March 24th, in the afternoon, after the hedge had been chipped, they started and they killed our 5 trees. Now, when I talked to the people that killed the trees, they said they had received a phone call ordering them to kill the 5 trees. So had there been an invoice, we would know that they weren't part of the plan. But no invoice, no report. And an arborist didn't need to be consulted as to why the 3 trees fell over. It's fairly obvious when you limb them and nail things to them and dig up the dirt and leave all the limbs on one side, they're eventually going to fall over. The other ones had sheared off the side, posed no danger, still were a green space. And at least half of the hedge was completely untouched by the snow, yet it was chipped. All the trees cut, even with the ground, to make sure there'd be no regrowth. Now, it doesn't make any sense for me, for Colwood, to be clear-cutting slopes that are on boulevards for, I have no idea what the reasoning behind it is, because no reasoning has been provided. The trees are gone. They were substantial. They were a big investment in time and money, and they're gone. So I just want to say this, that you've all seen the pictures, and it's hopefully clear from the pictures that none of this was necessary. And it was a huge expense to Colwood taxpayers with no accountability, no transparency, and no process. Thank you.
Any other members of the public? Just one moment while I retrieve Councillor Day.
Let me just lower this down then to my height.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Hindle. I live at 86 Milburn Drive, so you know where this is going.
Thanks for the heads up.
And I'm totally guilty. You did send out that form, the letter that had the links to the other 2 meetings, and I do apologize if I'm going to sound like if it's already been talked about, this part. My wife looks after 2, actually we both do. My wife is here tonight. We look after 2 autistic girls, and I say girls because even though they're in their 20s, they have the minds of 4-year-olds. When she goes to cross the road, she, definitely, exercises extreme caution because of them, because they don't always go. They're like children, imagine children, And when a car is at the top of the hill, it's safe to cross. It should be safe to cross. However, one of the times that she crossed, when she got Across with the girls, that driver had sped all the way down to the bottom, and a little too close for comfort is what I'm saying. Needless to say, my wife got a little verbal with the driver, and you can understand this. Might not be the best thing to do, but you can understand it because she's protective of these girls, as would anybody be protective of any child. I guess the point is, that my point that I'm making is this, and this is where, again, my ignorance is maybe showing here, but is there any kind of a regulation, or not so much a regulation, but a suggestion, if you will, that if so many people on a particular thoroughfare, and to be honest, it can also include Lagoon Road as well, because they do it on that road too, is there anything in the works or that should be done or has been done about whether or not, if so many signatures were supplied, that maybe something could be done about the speeding? Now, I'm not talking about, one of my daughters says, and she's older, she's mid-30s, talks about the flashing signs that have various types of symbols. To be honest, they're going to keep the honest people honest. They're going to, you and I, whether we like to admit it or not, we've all done it. We see the sign and it's like, oh my gosh, yes, of course. We're not talking about those people here. We're talking about the ones that excessively speed. And why? Just because they want to beat the traffic on Sooke Road, just to get a little faster on their way to work downtown. I mean, I know I go to work and I do take the lagoon simply because it makes sense for me and it's a beautiful drive at 40 kilometers an hour. It is a serious thing. I've lived on that road for about 14 years now. And, it's escalated over the period of time. Now, I understand population. I get this. I'm totally in favor of it. But still, you have people that are bypassing Sooke, going down both of those roads, and speeding. Not everybody does, but there is a substantial amount of speeding. So I guess back to my question, is there anything in place? One lady, and quite rightly so, recommended or said that, the police are stretched thin. And we understand that. We get that. I don't think a flashing sign is going to work. I'm asking about the signatures. Is there anything that can be done on our part? Because the onus is on us. I mean, yes, it's your call, but at the end of the day, the onus is on us to make you all aware. That's my question.
So this part is not usually for back and forths on there, but I will let you know we're missing Councillor Nault this evening, who is the chair of Transportation Public Infrastructure. So it might be a question to be put forward through to his committee, and I'll make sure that happens.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much for your time.
Any other comments or information from the public? Going to give you one more chance. All right. Thank you very much for those of you who did bring some matters to our attention. We always appreciate hearing from the public. Moving on to the next section, which is Mayor's Message. We have one more meeting before our council summer break, so things have been quite busy throughout the community. This being our 150 Canada celebration, it would be remiss to remind folks that Canada Day celebrations at Fort Rod Hill are going to be sort of spectacular coming up on July the 1st, so I'm hoping that many of you will take the time to go down there and participate. On that theme, I received confirmation from Western Forest organization, who are sponsoring and providing 150 trees to the community of City of Colwood for plantings in our parks and other places, so we can grow trees for the future with our children. We had hoped to have them in a bit earlier, but it may be something we're pulling off in September. So I think Colwood Creek is one of the first parks that will see some of those ones put in there. Another item was I had the pleasure of participating with Metchosin. District of Metchosin and Beecher Bay got together last week on First Nations Day and had a celebration in their community. And as an invited member of a neighboring community, I attended and was called on to witness the ceremony and the service that they provided to jointly there. So as a token I was presented with coin tokens, which is culturally one of the things they do, as well as a commemorative blanket from the Siano Nation and the District of Machosen. So those were provided to the elders of the Beecher Bay band that were there to participate, as well as the identified elders of Machosen District. And then there were a number of general public folks that were identified as participating and bearing witness to their service. So it was very interesting, that's for sure, and I was quite pleased to be part of that. Anyone else? I think Councillor Day, you had something coming up.
Not really an event coming up, but I just, it's in the minutes from the Productive Services Committee of April 19th, and I wanted to draw it to everyone's attention because there was a great deal of discussion in regards to traffic enforcement as well as other enforcement down at Esquimalt Lagoon. And the RCMP inspector really emphasized the importance of the role of the community in being willing to put forward their name, their address, and to follow up if they witness something happening that shouldn't be happening at the lagoon or anywhere in any neighborhood. That they really need members of the community to call their department with the complaint and be willing to give their name, their address, and their date of birth to the call taker, as this information forms part of the file and assists the police with their enforcement measures. So if it's something that you see happening in our community, please be prepared to follow up, and we really appreciate the people who have and continue to do that so that we can make a big difference for everyone.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one, we'll move on with that. Into our next section, items number 4.1 and 2, adoption of our regular minutes of Council June 12th. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Looking for receipt of protective services, April 19th.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Presentations. I'd like to welcome the Coastal Douglas-Fir and Associated Ecosystems Conservation Partnership. Todd, you are here to present.
All right, good evening. As a local member, do you need my name and things? You know who I am, right? Okay. As a local member of the steering committee for the Coastal Douglas-Fir Conservation Partnership, I'm just here to give you a bit of an overview of what the partnership is. And I just wanted to specify, I'm also a conservation specialist with CRD Regional Parks. I'm not here representing the CRD tonight, but I am representing the partnership. I'm going to have to do the two-handed button. Oh, there we go. So the Coastal Douglas-Fir Zone, or the CDF as it's known, is considered at risk for several reasons. It's the smallest of 16 ecological zones in the province and is globally unique, occurring almost entirely in BC. It's an excellent place for people to live, as we all know, and as a result of current and historic land use, the zone is almost 50% permanently altered by human development. About 9% of it is in protected areas, 80% is in private hands, and less than 1% of the old growth forest in this zone is now remaining. I'm just going to, I think I might have skipped this slide. That's where I want to be. So the endangered plant communities were identified in the CDF zone, and in response, the province released a conservation strategy back in 2008. This resulted in a number of initiatives, including the completion of ecosystem mapping for the zone. There were a number of workshops where people could share information, and there was an addition of Crown land to protected status. The CDF Conservation Partnership itself, or the CDFCP as it's called, was established formally in 2013. What is the CDF? Well, in dark green on this map, that is the CDF zone. The drier elements of the coastal western hemlock zone are shown here in light green, and that's also part of the area of interest for the partnership. And in addition to forested lands, associated ecosystems like wetlands, riparian zones, bluffs, and meadows are also included in the partnership. A major initiative of this partnership has been the development of a landscape modeling program to develop conservation planning. MarkSan, as it's known, is a computer program that incorporates ecological values and landscape constraints to identify the best possible areas for conservation objectives, to meet conservation objectives. With funding from the BC Real Estate Foundation and the North Pacific Landscape Conservation Partnership, Dr. Peter Arcis and his lab at UBC have developed this program and a web-based interface that members can use to both identify and analyze biodiversity targets and themes, as well as landscape constraints around conservation, and generate informative output maps, like you see above here. Now, for the coastal Douglas-Fir zone, we established a number of biodiversity targets based on over 30 conservation themes and a number of these landscape constraints. The targets were set at 17%, 30%, and 50% because the model optimizes for conservation, it doesn't mean necessarily 17 or 30% of the landscape, but 17 or 30% of the targets themselves. The 17% target was identified through the UN Biodiversity Convention and is a treaty that Canada has signed on to. The 50% target was identified as a nature needs half idea or concept, and the 30% target was a midway point between those two. Now, the analysis taken across this very large landscape, but it's also important at a local context. The Nature Conservancy of Canada has used the data to identify areas in our region for priority outreach and securement opportunities. We're currently working with the Gambier Island Local Trust Committee to help them review their official community plan, and through that, they're identifying areas of potential stewardship opportunities, as well as areas for consideration as trail or park areas. This is the sales pitch. So first and foremost, it's free. Partnership is a statement of cooperation, and there is no financial or legal binding responsibility on the municipality. We now have about 40 CDFCP members from a range of different areas: provincial, municipal governments, landowners, conservation groups, woodlot operators, and other interested parties. And really the whole idea is that as a group of members, we aspire to these broad general goals, and we have opportunities for project planning and development through joint funding and grant proposals to work together at the local level. And so why would Colwood be interested? I've just got a couple of maps here at the end. So just to back to refresh your memory of the sort of area of analysis that we've looked at, the CDF analysis has been done at this very broad landscape scale. But Colwood, as the star indicates, Colwood and your neighbors here are really at the base of that area, and really important in terms of conservation and stewardship. Important contribution. So this is a little bit closer to home. Now, the regional analysis that we did locked in parks and protected areas in the data that we used. There we go. This is the regional analysis at 17%, and as you can see, the blue dots here are part of that 17% solution. And there's obviously a few pieces missing if you can recognize some of the landscape there. Havenwood Park is identified as contributing to that target, but there's a couple of properties that are really not showing there. Port Rod Hill and Hatley Park, Royal Roads are two of those, which are actually parks. And this is part of the challenge we continue to work on, is to improve our data sets and our analysis. But there are other reasons why these properties may not be identified, and that's the landscape constraints. Some of the things like property size, property cost, and adjacency to development are constraints that would reduce the score on certain properties. But that doesn't remove their importance on a local scale. And those two properties, as well as places like Latoria Creek and Colwood Creek, are really important on the local level for green space and for biodiversity conservation. And so it's really important to work at that big scale, but also at the local scale, to make sure that we keep these sort of values on the landscape. And through the partnership, we are able to share information and expertise to do that. So we hope that through this process and through our partnerships, we can achieve this vision for ecological integrity by really recognizing and evaluating the importance of these ecosystems on our landscapes, supporting our quality of life where we all, I think, would agree that this is a great place to be and to do that. So I'd like to thank you for letting me give you a little bit of an overview of the Coastal Douglas-Fir Conservation Partnership. You can, there we go. You can get further information at the CDFCP.ca website or contact our coordinator, Katie Bell, at the email that's identified here. And we've been supported by a number of really generous funders. I've listed some of them here on the screen just for some context. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
And with that, I'll turn it to council. Any questions of?
Thank you. Through the chair, how many municipalities are already part of your organization in Victoria, like the Greater Victoria? I don't care about the rest of the province. I don't.
Well, I'll start big and go small. So we have, as I said, we have 40 members, and there are a number of regional districts and a couple of municipalities and other groups that are involved. At this level, at the regional level here in the CRD, we've only really started reaching out in the last couple of months and made a couple of presentations like this one. So we're really just starting that process. So we're eagerly seeking out memberships and partners.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Todd, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
We do have another presentation here with Habitat for Humanity. Yolanda,
I'm here.
how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. We're just making a little quick change if we can for some better images because it didn't work very well when I made a PDF out of my PowerPoint presentation. So I got to get the... Okay, I have never in my life made this presentation in 5 minutes, so here we go. I think everyone is familiar with Habitat for Humanity, and we're about trying to bring strength and stability to families that are in a lower income situation. We have a vision that everyone in the world should have a safe and decent place to live, and we do that by mobilizing members of the community to try to achieve that mission, and we are the only affordable housing provider that is a charity that's dealing with home ownership as opposed to affordable rental in the area. We are a separately registered charity from the mothership of Habitat Canada and Habitat for Humanity International. We're a federated model, so we're all bound by a common goal, and there are 56 affiliates in the country and 70 countries in the world where Habitat builds. I wanted tonight to sort of give you a sense of how the program actually works because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about who we serve and how we serve them. But first I wanted to say that the founding thing underneath all of it is land. And as I'm sure you can imagine, we are having a huge challenge attaining land to the point where it's paralyzing our ability to build. And so part of my reason today was to present you with what we're trying to do about that. We are talking to developers, faith-based community, and of course, the various membership in the CRD and the municipalities and cities that may potentially have an opportunity for us. Once we have secured land, and we do have a couple of opportunities in our land bank, next up is a lot in Central Saanich as part of a larger development. We go out into the community to raise the funds to cover the costs of construction. We do it the way any other charity would, through individual donations and sponsorship. And volunteers, both skilled and unskilled, play a huge role in achieving that. And then once we've identified that a project is viable, we qualify families. And in order to be a family with Habitat, you must be a Canadian citizen, you must have lived in the Greater Victoria area for 2 years, and you must have minor children living in the home, preferably under the age of 10. That's an important understanding that our niche is families because we're trying to have the greatest impact, particularly intergenerationally. Next, we look at 3 core things: living in need, the ability to pay the interest-free mortgage, and a willingness to partner with Habitat. When we partner with families, we do so in conjunction, like I said, with paid for and donated goods and in-kind donations, such as, for example, working with Camosun College or other skills laborers. We bring them on board, so it's a workplace skills training experience that also benefits the community. So rather than building a shed on the college grounds, you're actually building a home that you can drive by and feel a part of forevermore. Every family that partners with Habitat here and around the world has to contribute 500 hours of sweat equity. And here's where some of the misconceptions, I think, happen. Habitat families are home owners, which means they purchase it, and they purchase their home at the full fair market value. So what a lot of people don't understand is, well, how is that possible? It's possible because Habitat holds the mortgage. We're the lender, and we lend with no money down, no interest on the loan, and amortization is irrelevant to us. What we do is assess every year a household income and take no more than 30% of that household income, including property taxes. What we then do with the mortgage payments is invest them for seed cash flow funding to help build the next homes. So as a Habitat partner family, not only are you building equity in your own home, you're providing funding that will enable us to help another family that was in a situation like you. So we call that a pay-it-forward model, and we're really proud of it because it kind of has a built-in sustainability. So anyone who invests in it, like the CRD Regional Housing Trust invested in the past, means that that funding is recouped within a year or two from the payments that the families make to be reinvested into the next home. We've built 22 homes in the region to date. None have been in Colwood, and we'd like to see that change. It's part of the reason I'm here tonight. Obviously, this is just a slide about what the local challenge is and how crazy it is in terms to find affordable home ownership. I do want to point out that Habitat is, with one exception, not building single-family homes at all in our region. We are looking at multiplexes because we have to get the cost out of the land. One of the other things that's really cool about Habitat family is that many are living in subsidized housing. So they go from being the recipients of taxpayer dollars to becoming taxpayer dollars. And I think that provides a really important mental shift for our families and a much greater level of investment in their community. So families are why we do what we do. I've come here tonight to sort of make an appeal to see if there is the possibility of land in the land bank. We don't necessarily expect that that would be donated outright. We want to work with the municipality to figure out something that might be possible. If a site is secured, we would probably be coming to you to ask for a variance in the number of units that could go on that site. And we would also be looking at a waiving of fees or a contribution through any affordable housing funds to help us make that happen. We currently actually have an accepted offer on some land in Colwood, and we're working with it, but it's on a bare land strata and requires a subdivision out of it, so we'll need the other owner's consent. We're not sure what's going to happen with that, but we are striving to do something in your municipality right now. The final thing I'd like to say that I really like about Habitat for Humanity is that we self-generate all of our operational overhead through our restore. And not only does it cover all of the costs for everything that we do, it also contributes to the Build Fund, which means that anytime anyone makes a donation to our charity, 100% of it goes into building homes or buying land for our families. And that was it in, I don't know how much time. So now I can answer some questions that you may have about I have a little myths and facts part because I know people get confused about our program.
Council, any questions?
Thank you. So the one thing I appreciate, thank you for coming out, and I appreciate you actually getting rid of some of the misconceptions. My one question that still arises is, since the family owns the house, and we're in such a hot market right now, that they could possibly move in next month, and then in a year from now, that house is worth $150,000 more. Do they have to resell it to another person who qualifies for Habitat for Humanity, or is it just free market at that point?
No, it's not free market for a minimum of 20 years. Habitat retains on title a first right of refusal and option to purchase that has a sort of graded sharing of equity. They always get their principal payments back, but changes in the market value they don't participate that at all for the first 10 years, and then there's a graded sharing over time the longer they stay in the home.
Thank you.
And Councillor Day?
Thank you. It was my understanding that you don't necessarily build accessible homes. Is that true?
No, that's not true. We actually have built accessible homes. The Flexplex, it's called, at the corner of Saanich and Blanchard, has 3 units that were garden suites that were built that are all accessible through an external chairlift that are for low-income people with disabilities. And one of the units was built with an internal elevator to meet the needs of the child of that family. And really, basically, what dictates our ability to do that is access to sufficient land. So we don't build them all that way, but we certainly do if we have a family that has identified with those needs.
Thank you.
Any other members? Yolanda, thank you so much for presenting to council.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
And go shop at Restore, guys.
Yes, yes.
Or donate there. Moving into correspondence, 6.1 letter received from the District of Sooke, Councillor Kevin Pearson, in regards to the Wanda Fuca Marine Search and Rescue Society request for support. Council? Councillor Day?
I haven't had any presentations in my time on council from this organization. I wonder if we would consider inviting them to present, because I'm really not very aware of how they operate or how they work.
Totally true, and I took the opportunity when this was received to talk to our fire department first responder to find out if there's been any associated interactions and whatever, and the chief indicated that not in his tenure with the department has he known that there's been any interaction. Anybody else? Would you like to see that presentation?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The only other, through you, is should this perhaps go to the emergency prep committee and let them deal with it and then make a recommendation back to this council, or does council just think that it should just go straight to them?
But I don't think they
posing
provide
a question versus giving an answer.
any ideas from that.
I was just going to
Okay.
suggest, Madam
Emergency-
Mayor, if they wanted it to go to emergency planning, only council wouldn't then hear directly what it's all about. They'd only hear what their program is all about through the minutes of that meeting. And it is going to be a request for funding, which makes it also something to consider at budget deliberations.
Who came up with that? Yeah, what a stupid idea that was.
Are you going on holidays?
I am going on holidays.
I'd like to take Councillor Day's consideration on that and perhaps maybe reach out to these folks and see if they've got something available. So I need something from council, please.
So I would move that we invite them to present to council. I would suggest September.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. We'll get that letter off to them. Second letter was from the town of View Royal and the Tour de Rock. There was a request from one of the View Royal firefighters to sponsor in the Tour de Rock event upcoming. Councillor Day?
I think it's a great idea. Unfortunately, because our grant and aid funding is fully allotted for this year, I don't see that we have an opportunity to do anything at this time, unless someone else has an idea. But I do think that if they could find a way to make an application to our next year's budget, then we could include them in the mix.
And we can certainly send them back that information. With that,
so I'll move that we send them a letter explaining that our funding is fully allotted for this year and recommending that they apply for sponsorship in next year's grant and aid.
seconder?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Third item was the BC Transit letter that was provided to us at our desk spaces.
Your worship.
There.
May I do an introduction?
I was just going to say,
BC Transit staff have been meeting with the staff of City of Colwood and the City of View Royal to talk about providing an express bus lane or improvements to transit on the Old Island Highway from Goldstream to the Trans-Canada Highway on-ramp. And this is part of the transportation master plan that BC Transit has in place, and we were at the staff level very enthusiastic about the conversation. It's relatively new for BC Transit to make capital infrastructure investments. They've been traditionally bus purchasers, not land improvement people, and the first time they did this was with the express bus lanes that were put on Douglas Street in Victoria. And that was a partnership where Transit paid for the major improvements, but it was a joint planning process and design process, both with the local jurisdiction and BC Transit. And that's what they're proposing to do here as well with Colwood and View Royal, because we do share the Old Island Highway to that on-ramp. So in this particular case, BC Transit would be paying for the costs, and we would just be providing in-kind staff to assist in the design and ultimately, hopefully, a final product that can be tendered. Lastly, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. There's a very strategic reason for doing this section of the road. We're seeing bus lanes being built, I think, up to Helmken, coming out of Victoria, along with the Mackenzie Overpass project. So it leaves a small section of Trans-Canada between the Colwood on-ramp and Helmken that doesn't have the express bus lane. And they believe, and I think we do as well, that, or staff do, I should say, that finishing that bookend will help us get that last section of bus lane done. And this, as I said, is part of a large master transportation plan that BC Transit had tabled some years ago. The corridors that are being built today for buses could very easily be converted into light rapid transit at some point in the future when the densities permit, financially permit those to go forward. So we think this is, at the staff level, a very worthy project for us to get involved with if it's council's wish to do that.
so the request from Transit is that staff be asked to work with BC Transit on the transit priority and park and ride study. So that's the recommendation that we're looking for.
So move. Second.
Councillor Day?
Just there's quite a few features to what's written up in the letter, including transit priority measures and road geometry, as well as enhancements to the passenger realm, pedestrian connections, and transit operations, as well as the park and ride options. So that is a whole lot of stuff to plan for. And I'm supportive of being involved, but I'm a little bit concerned that we kind of get our hopes up only to later find out that this might be scaled back to a much smaller benefit for a whole lot of upfront staff time from the city. So I would like to hear more about what our CAO was just referring to about the bus priority lane. It seemed like it was being talked about on the highway from the Colwood exit to wherever they begin the bus priority lane in Saanich, which would be entirely within View Royal. So I'm just wondering, what is our contribution compared to View Royal's contribution? Equal or more?
Your Worship, Right now, I believe all the conversations we've had was that we would work in partnership between View Royal, Colwood, and BC Transit. So we wouldn't be working in isolation as Colwood and BC Transit and View Royal and BC Transit. We would work together collectively and then report back out to our respective councils. Because we'd like to try and provide some consistent approach so that when you're driving down Old Island Highway or on a bus on Old Island Highway that you don't notice that you've gone from one jurisdiction into another.
Well, I'm certainly supportive at this time. I've talked about park and rides for many elections. I think they're very important to plan for and to plan for early. Certainly signal timing is something that we have already just talked about. So I'm supportive of it going forward, but I really do want us to be very careful that we don't end up doing all the work.
Any other comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving into the next section. Item 7.1, Protective Services, recommendation for Fire Dispatch Communication Services Agreement. Councillor Day.
Thank you. The Protective Services Committee reviewed a report from the Chief, and the District of Saanich is requesting a one-year extension to the current agreement, only a one-year extension at this time, to allow them time to roll out a new service model and agreement for fire dispatch and communication services. Funding for this service is already in the current operating budget, and there will be no financial implications associated with the extension. And it was recommended, and I would so move, that Council approve an extension of the current fire dispatch and communication services agreement for the provision of its currently existing dispatch services with the Saanich Fire Department, and that the Mayor and Chief Administrative Officer be authorized to execute the agreement on behalf of the City of Colwood.
Seconder, please. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, Fire Services Agreement, 7.1.2. Councillor Day.
Thank you. Also from the same meeting and from the Chief, Colwood has been invited to join into an agreement regarding provision of services throughout the region. The City of Colwood's Fire Department has some unique services to offer to the region, especially since declaring itself as a full-service fire department under the new playbook launched by the Office of the Fire Commissioner in 2015. And it's a cost-neutral agreement for the sharing of resources, and the purpose of the agreement is to deal with the rare or one-off type of incidents when additional or specialized resources are required to deal with the emergency at hand. Each of the parties to the agreement will be conducting a community risk assessment as set out by the NFPA to identify the potential one-off type of incidents that could occur. So it's a proactive emergency planning exercise throughout the region, and will allow pre-planning for additional resources that may be required to help deal with low frequency but high risk type incidents that could stretch resources in their own areas. So it was recommended by committee, and I would move that we approve the participation of the City of Colwood in the Fire Service Agreement with the Corporation of the District of Saanich, the Corporation of the District of Central Saanich, the Township of Esquimalt, and the Town of View Royal, and the Corporation of the District of Oak Bay for the provision of resources for emergency incident response, and that the Mayor and Chief Administrative Officer be authorized to execute the agreement on behalf of the City.
Second. Any questions or comments? Councillor Day, were they able to give any descriptive of an incident that had required this kind of a turnout?
What we talked about was one very unique piece of equipment that we have is the foam trailer, and it is used in very particular and specific circumstances. So through this agreement, if there was an incident that required such an apparatus, that apparatus would be made available to the area in need, and the area need would replenish the apparatus when they were done after the incident. So it would be relatively a cost neutral. It's not a making money and it's not a losing money situation. It's just a sharing of resources.
Well, I can think of back in the day when the Ogden Point fire took place downtown, and I think that was an all hands on deck call out from every piece of equipment that was available in the local area.
It also allows the fire chiefs to get together and plan so that within the region, should there be a big scenario, which they'll put a lot of effort into identifying, everyone has a part of the puzzle and no one area has to come up with everything.
Yeah, good. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. 7.2, Finance and Admin, report from the Director of Finance. I understand. Thank you. 7.2.1.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have almost completed our series of reports to Council that are required, our annual various menu of reports. So as we've worked our way through budget, the financial statements, and you have in front of you this evening the Statement of Financial Information as required by the Financial Information Act and regulations. It's very tightly scripted because this is in accordance with the regulations provided to us. Much of the information you have seen already, such as the financial statements, which are referenced here. The amount of debt is also included in our financial statements. So I'm looking at sections 3 and 4. Section 6 gives you an overview of council remuneration and expenses as laid out in your bylaw in terms of council and mayor's compensation, with small amounts there for expenses for attendance at meetings such as AVICC, UBCM. Schedule 7 is the schedule of your employees' remuneration and expenses. And this is a combination of exempt staff who you have individual contracts with that lay out the wages and benefit packages, and also your CUPE staff. And I would note that the maximum of $75,000 has not been raised for this particular disclosure, so the list does look a little longer than it did a number of years ago. It's been probably about 10 years since that limit was reviewed. We've tried to give you a bit of explanatory notes there at the bottom, a little bit of fine print, sorry about that. But there's a few things there. The gross earnings, I'm just going to give you a little bit of information here. That excludes taxable benefits. So if we have staff members who, for instance, have received a large payout of overtime that they've been banking over the years, or vacation that they haven't taken, that we pay that out, anything that is a large cash payout, that will be reflected in the gross earnings column. On the other hand, some people who may have been away on a leave, their earnings will be lower than you would normally expect due to a leave. The taxable benefits section is a bit of an interesting mix when we consider what CRA taxes and does not tax. One of the biggest expenses that council does pay for and is not reflected here is the 10% premium that you pay for the superannuation contributions on your staff. So whatever those gross earnings are, it's about 10%, and at this time that is not a taxable benefit, that is not included in there. The other things that are not included are things like extended health and dental premiums. At this point, that's not a taxable benefit. So just to shed a little bit of light. And then the other column that you see there, expenses, is monies that have been reimbursed to an employee, generally speaking, for training costs and a little bit of travel. So that is Schedule 7 of that report. Section, sorry, make sure I don't miss anything here. Section 8, we did have 2 severance agreements, which council is aware of, that were covered in 2016, and those are disclosed as required. Section 9, schedule of payments to suppliers of goods and services. Again, this cap or disclosure cap of $25,000 has not been reviewed for a very long time, and it does tend to make for a very long list here. And there's quite a list there. So basically, I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. There is a lot of information there, so I'll give it a shot. Otherwise, we are basically looking for a motion from council to receive the annual report as presented.
Recommendation, council? Questions?
I got questions.
Somebody?
Actually, I don't have questions. I guess I have two. Thank you, Mayor. I have two statements that concern me that I just hope the council just notices. If you're looking at Section 9, you know, there's two huge expenses. One is BC Hydro, you know, that we're spending over $250,000 a year on hydro. I would love for staff to, I know, for example, with West Shore Park and Rec, we've spent a significant amount of money converting everything to LED, and there was some significant cost savings there. So I would love next year to see what staff brings forward to see if we can minimize that cost. The other expenditure in Schedule 9 that concerns me is just around our IT support services. Between Langford and Purr, we're $221,000 for IT services, and I think that's a little steep for what we're getting. So I would love to look at re-examining that, but everything else, the report's perfect. The numbers are what the numbers are. I mean, it's more of a philosophical thing than it is deciding that the Sophie's wrong.
I do have a comment on the IT questions, if I may, through the mayor. The figure for the city of Langford, it is a little bit confusing. The IT support services of $136,500. That actually is $80,000 for support services indeed, but there's another $50,000 in there that we have to pay for licenses and maintenance. Like that is, and actually thank you to PER. It turns out we did a bit of an audit, and we now are paying for the full amount of licenses we're actually using. So that was an important tune-up to get us paying for the right number of licenses. So that's not all straight IT services. And there's also some monies in there. We do reimburse Langford for the RCMP. They have a network administrator, and we pay a third of that portion of their salary. So that's included in there as well. So that's part of kind of an RCMP cost. So just for your information, yes, PER is a contractor, and at this point, we are going to be hiring a new person shortly, and from what I've seen, there is not going to be a big savings by the time we pay for wages and benefits. It'll probably be a bit of a wash, but just a bit of information additional, looking forward to 2017.
Good. Thank you. Councillor Day.
Sorry, just on that, we also have, in 2016, we also had Clive working, I believe, that fits in the same category with IT, and that was almost $55,000. I'm just wondering if perhaps we no longer need those services once we get our IT person.
Correct. There was a couple of capital projects in the budget which council did approve, and Clive was working on 2 of those projects. One of them was a major chart of accounts revision, and that conversion was about $15,000 to $20,000 of his time. And as I say, it was in the budget. The other one was new budget software. Again, that was in the budget as well. So those 2 items, we should see a significant decrease going forward into next year.
So as the director has asked, we need a recommendation.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, 7.2.2, the 2016 Annual Development Cost Charge Report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, this is an annual report that we're required to file. And looking this evening for motion to receive the report for information. This is required by the provincial government, by the ministry, to monitor the development cost charges that not only are we collecting, but that we're spending. And when we went through budget this year, you may remember that we are looking actually for significant revenues to continue to come in these areas because of the amount of development happening. And if you've had a look at Appendix A of the report, you'll note that the road DCC balance in particular started at 1.4 million almost, and we added about 50% to that last year with the amount of developments that were going on. And at this point, we have spent very little money from that, and we in fact are doing a bit of an internal audit right now to ensure that the monies that have been spent are in compliance, and that will be reflected on next year's report if there's any changes. The auditor has been made aware of that and has mentioned it to you in his report. It's not a material amount, but we're glad that it's been brought to our attention, and we will ensure that we're on side with that. A lot of this is tied to a new DCC bylaw that's required to get all the new projects incorporated into that. We also are, we saw almost a doubling of the monies coming in. It's not a lot of money, but again, it's reflective of the development in terms of sewer DCCs. Now, because a lot of the projects currently in the building process in Colwood are not actually within the sewer area, like they're not required to pay DCCs. So we don't see the monies coming in as great an amount as we do for roads. So I just thought I would point that out. So that's your annual sort of summary look at our DCCs.
Questions of staff?
I'll just move receipt.
Seconder, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next on Finance and Administration, 7.2.3, Memorandum Administrative Assistant regarding Colwood Heritage Commission Bylaw, number 1526, an amendment for quorum.
I'll speak to that matter. We dealt with this at our Heritage Commission meeting last go around. We tend to have a problem getting a quorum. Some of the members have dropped out. The current bylaw stipulates we need 6 members to make a quorum, and we're proposing an amendment to the bylaw to reduce that to 5. And the bylaw's put before you this morning or this evening for first 3 readings.
And would that continue to say that one of those 5 would be a member of council?
Yes.
So this is for information because we'll be dealing with it in the bylaws anyways. Councillor Day?
I just wanted to say that I was on the Heritage Commission when we blended 2 committees, and I think the 6 number that we came up with for quorum was to ensure that nobody felt that one committee outdid another. So I think that switching to 5 is perfectly acceptable for the quorum.
Good, thank you. Receive for information because it's going to be further dealt with, please.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Last one in Finance and Admin is an update on CRD Animal Control Services Agreement. Who's taking that one?
That one. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is just a follow-up from our May 23rd council meeting where council looked at the CRD Animal Control Services Agreement and approved execution with the CRD. We did consult with the CRD before it was brought to council in May, sent the agreement to the CRD for execution, and we were advised that their new legal counsel has some changes that they'd like to make to the agreement. So we felt that we had to bring this back to council and make sure they were aware of the changes that were being proposed. So the CRD agreement currently includes the, so this isn't about their services or the work that they do for us. This is about the whole legal side of it. And I'm sure council remembers one of the benefits that we were promoting with our agreement with CRD was the fact that they cover the legal costs. The legal counsel in CRD now is originally was requesting that we change the agreement so that there's no requirement for them to get an authorizing resolution from the City of Council before they pursue any civil remedies. And they felt that that was necessary in order for them to control the legal fees and the costs that are associated with pursuing those legal remedies, which could be dog destruction orders and things like that. So they've implemented a $10,000 per year legal fee maximum for pursuing those actions. That doesn't relate to any of the in-house work that they can manage themselves, which is search warrants and filing for civil proceedings and dog destruction orders. But it is going to be, whether it's one issue or 20 issues, if they have to obtain outside counsel to assist with these dog destruction order and related processes, pardon me, then they have to get council's approval. I think I lost track of my thought there. So the $10,000 cap, whether there's one thing or there's 10 things, it's a maximum of $10,000 a year. Anything over $10,000 a year, the city would have to pay for. That said, they can't pursue any remedies at all without first getting council's approval. They wanted us to waive that. Our lawyer says don't, that we need to retain that kind of control. And anytime somebody's pursuing a legal remedy on behalf of the city requires an authorizing resolution anyway. So we need to hang on to that. So over a period of about 2 weeks, we were going back and forth with our legal counsel and the CRD's legal counsel. And the proposed new wording that's provided in the memorandum under 6.1C and 6.1G is one that's been agreed to and understood to be workable by everybody. Our lawyer did want to point out that we should keep in mind that a dangerous dog proceeding, for example, can be anywhere from $10,000 to $40,000 a year. So there is an understanding why CRD would like to have some kind of a cap or some kind of control. And again, it's their discretion to pursue it, but they need to get council's permission before they can pursue it. So there's still a good balance of whether there's success or it's worthy of our time and our costs. And the lawyer does still feel that this is a good deal for the City of Colwood, and if we find that it's not serving us well, it is a term agreement that council can revisit and renegotiate when the time comes. So the proposed wording in section 6.G is based on our lawyer's recommendations, and the CRD wanted us to emphasize that over the last 15 years, none of the municipalities that they serve have had more than one of these types of cases in any given year, and Colwood has never had any. And over the last 15 years, only 3 contested dog destruction orders have ever cost more than $10,000 in legal fees, and that's serving 9 municipalities, 3 electoral areas, and I believe they said 3, if not 4 other areas, which perhaps could be some of our First Nation lands or things like that. I believe they do services for as well. So for Colwood, we retain the authority before they can pursue anything. There is a $10,000 maximum cap per calendar year, and we just are looking for council to approve the proposed change to section 1C, 6.1C and G, and authorize execution.
And just to be clear, that the correct wording is the highlighted yellow wording.
That is correct, yes.
Council?
I would move the recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion?
Through the mayor to staff, when you're negotiating a contract, and basically what they've done is they've limited their liability by putting this $10,000 clause in, which never existed before. So basically they built a one-way contract that benefits them, but I'm not seeing what we gained by allowing them to minimize their liability. So I'm just curious, why would I ever want to sign a contract that adds more liability onto the Colwood taxpayer without me seeing that we're getting any additional benefit out of that? I just don't negotiate a contract normally like that where I just give up stuff just for giving it up. So I guess I'm asking the staff, what are we getting in return for giving this specific thing up?
That's true. I think the challenge that we have is that nobody else offers covering legal fees, or certainly not that we're aware of. I know in 2012 when we did our comparisons, that absolutely was not on the table with the other party that was interested in providing services. One of the things that, excuse me just one moment, I just need to find where I am here. One of the things the CRD mentioned is that this is not just affecting Colwood. They're actually rewriting 5 animal control services agreements with municipalities right now, which will take effect for year 2018. And all of them are being written with the same change in the 2 sections that we've mentioned earlier. And then contracts after that, there's another 4 or 5 of them that will come up for renewal after 2018, and all of them will have those same provisions put in there as well. I believe the CRD thinks there's a balance of, in the course of 15 years, in all of the areas they serve, there's only been 3 times when. And the balance of $10,000 sounds like, quite a low cap, but there's a lot of stuff that they will continue to do internally and manage and process internally that doesn't contribute to the $10,000 cost. The $10,000 cost is when you have a certain kind of civil remedy you're going after that requires outside counsel, so not CRD's lawyers, but outside counsel to provide advice and recommendations. That's where the money will start kicking into the $10,000 cost.
I guess for myself, I'm not going to repeat myself, but I mean, obviously, I don't understand how we would give something up and get nothing back in return. But the second issue that I have is that if this isn't an agreement among all the municipalities, if some of the municipalities don't have this $10,000 liability and others do, I mean, I certainly am not interested in taking that on and taking that liability on when another municipality doesn't. I mean, if they want to change the contracts, they should change all the contracts at the same time in 2018. It seems kind of strange to me that we're taking on something that other municipalities don't have to take on.
Well, these are contracts that they are working on that would be effective 2018. I think we're just first up. But there's 4 or 5 they're working on now with the same clauses coming into effect.
Councillor Day.
I just want to speak to the clarification on the $10,000 because my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the CRD is planning to manage the files primarily in-house. And then if they have to go get external advice for a particularly difficult case, they will cover up to $10,000. It's the amounts over and above the $10,000 that they would charge Colwood for, and Colwood would have to first agree to proceed on the matter. So it would be within our purview to say, no, we don't want to be the one to try this particular case because it's maybe precedent setting or whatever. And what I hear the history is that only 3 times in their entire history have they ever had to do that type of a case.
If I may, Madam Mayor, I do understand what Councillor Martin is saying, though, and I did have a lot of email arguments back and forth with the CRD changing the agreement after we'd already consulted on the agreement. But they're pretty steadfast in this is a change that they feel needs to be undertaken, and it's going across all their contracts.
With that, any other questions or comments? And then we need the recommendation.
Yeah, it's moved.
Any further all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Mr. Martin opposed?
That's Councillor Martin to you.
No way. You're on holidays. 7.3, transportation public infrastructure. In the absence of Councillor Nault, memorandum in regards to 7.3.1, increased vehicular monitoring of Lagoon Road and Melbourne. Will you take that one? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is simply to inform Council that staff are actively working towards collecting data that will help form the basis for a more holistic approach to traffic calming for the area. As Council and staff are aware, the City does continue to receive correspondence from residents with regard to concerns about speeding in this and other areas of Colwood. And indeed, we've heard from residents earlier this evening during public participation. We are definitely committed to hearing and investigating those concerns and to implementing traffic calming where appropriate in a thoughtful and measured approach. And this report just simply outlines one such way that we're trying to get more data in order to have an informed approach to traffic calming in this and other areas.
Thank you. Questions to staff? Councillor Day?
Thank you. It says that you're using 3 speed reader boards to collect vehicular data, which is the time, date, and speed, and identifies that you're putting one on Machosen Road, Millburn Road, and Lagoon Road. Is the data being collected both ways or one way only?
So, through your worship, we currently have one board that has been placed. It's placed on Machosen Road. It collects data one way only. The 2 remaining boards that we have will collect data one way only. Should council so direct, we have not yet placed the boards on Melbourne and Lagoon, but it was our intent to place one on Millburn going down the decline, because that appears to be of significant concern, and it stands to reason that traffic will be going faster on a decline. And the same for Lagoon. Lagoon was again, there's definite decline, and we would put the reader boards on that to capture the highest data possible. So most speed on the decline.
I would just suggest that the area that's probably been pointed out most often, I mean, there's been many, but the left turn onto Heather Bell from Lagoon Road is a particularly difficult area. It's also one of the areas where there's bound to be more children walking on the road. But I'm not sure if the kids won't really be captured, of course, in terms of how many pedestrians there are. But with the vehicular speeds, I think that would be helpful.
We're good. Receive for information.
Move proceed.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving into bylaws, folks. 8.1, bylaw number 1685, final reading. Oh, West Shore Parks and Rec, sorry, folks. Councillors Chong and Martin are both representatives at West Shore Parks and Rec, and therefore are not eligible to vote on this.
Move final.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We can grab them back. I'll do introduction. Bylaw number 1688, final reading for Colwood, Maine Sewer Local Area Service Bylaw and Establishment. Bylaw number 598, 2001, amendment number 58 for 3439 Fulton Road.
Move final.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Bylaw number 1689, final reading for Colwood West Sewer Local Area Service Establishment. Amendment number 43 for 3439 Fulton Road.
Move final. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Bylaws number, just going back to my notes of what we dropped off of our agenda, because it doesn't show on my electronic. 8.4 and 8.5 we are not doing. Moving on to 8.6, bylaw number 1693 for first, second, and third readings. This is the Colwood Heritage Commission bylaw, removing one person from quorum to a balance of 5.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Move second.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Move third.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. No release of anything in camera. All those in
I don't think I heard them.
all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. You